And we're live on Table Your Views with Dr. Denise Soyafat Angus. It's a show where we're here to discuss the political arena about what's going on in Tobago. Dr. Soyafat Angus, are you willing to introduce yourself, or can you just give us a brief background on yourself?
Well, I think I'm well known to persons across Tobago and even in Trinidad. But I'm Dr. Denise Soyafat Angus, the former presiding officer of the Tobago House of Assembly, and most recently independent candidate in the last Tobago House of Assembly election.
All right, you have such a lovely background. Tell us, how did you get involved in politics?
Well, it is a decision that you take a long and hard look at, or you should take a long and hard look at before you get involved. Because it is a decision where you make a lot of sacrifices to put your line on the life for people. And if you are committed to helping people and making a difference in the lives of people, then certainly it is an area where, you know, one can fit in. But it's by no means an easy road to walk. And that is why you have to have a passion for people in order to stay involved in the game.
Okay, that's a very lovely answer. Tell us, how would your family have felt with all these sacrifices you've been making for them?
It has not been easy from time to time, you know. Balancing family life and the life of politics, it hasn't always, we haven't always seen eye to eye with it. But I think my children, they're at an age now where they understand what making a difference in the lives of others really means and what it means to me. And they have been very supportive, you know, during the last couple of years with the decisions I have taken in terms of going forward. So I have their support, my husband, and also, of course, my mother is always there at my side. Yes.
All right. You just told us that you would have run as an independent candidate. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you would have actually broken a record by receiving the most amount of votes for an independent candidate. Now, tell us a little bit about that. How did that make you feel?
I think I was pleased that I was able to make a statement, you know, and I was pleased that the people heard my message and they understood, because the disadvantage that I would have had as coming out as an independent candidate is that basically I had 2 weeks to campaign.
Okay.
Others had 4 years, the incumbent had 4 years, and the new person on the block had about 4 to 5 months. And basically I came out in 2 weeks and garnered 269 votes. And so yes, it is quite an achievement, but I think more importantly, it was about the statement that was being made and what persons were willing to buy into. The fact that the voices of the people must be heard and they must not be ignored. And it was as simple as that. And I think the statement was made.
Okay, congratulations on that. Now, my question to you, would you continue being a voice for the persons who can't be heard, or would you encourage persons to speak up, or what would you do from here now?
Yes, well, I mean, I've lived my life giving voice to the voiceless in some way, shape, or form. And it has always been what I have done in terms of making a difference for people, seeing where I can contribute to their betterment or their quality of life. So that is just part of me. And so, yes, it's something that I will continue to do no matter what, because it's just so ingrained in who I am. So that part doesn't stop.
All right. Last week, Thursday, we saw the swearing in of the assemblymen by the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, given that they were not able to convene the House, tell us, what does that really mean for those who would have been sworn in?
Okay, so once you have an election, which we had on January 25th, you had 12 persons who won their seats. It means that people in Tobago said this is who we want for our representative, and they won those seats. Now, normally you will end up with one party winning more seats than the other party. And this time around, you know, for years of predictions of persons who said, I wonder if, you know, it's no longer an if. It is a when, and it happened. And so we have the 6-6 scenario. Now, when the assemblymen were sworn in, from the day they won the elections and they're sworn in, they are being paid to be representatives of the people. It means that the 12 of them now have access to a constituency office provided by the Assembly Legislature, and they can go into those offices and begin servicing the people.
Okay.
Okay? That is the first step. That is even before going into the House, which is the next step. And so they begin servicing the people at the level of the representation and the constituency offices. So regardless of what happens, that is already set because they were sworn in as assemblymen.
Okay.
So what you then had was a situation where you're supposed to go into the House of Assembly, the legislature, in order to reconstitute a new house for the new term. And we saw where both sides went into the House and they could not choose a presiding officer.
Another 6-6 draw again.
6-6 draw. And it wasn't unexpected. And so you have, at this point, you don't have a presiding officer, but you have a clerk who is presiding over the House. And so with the Tobago House of Assembly Act, along with the standing orders, which sort of gives more detailed guidelines in terms of how you operationalize the act, the clerk used the standing orders in order, in order to preside over the proceedings. And when she came to the second time and no one had chosen through the secret ballot, she arrested the House. You know, she said, we have exhausted and therefore we are closing out. Excuse me. Now, at that point, I know that Mr. Augustine raised a point of, order where he questioned whether we could not use the Standing Order 91. Now, that could be taken in two ways, because according to the Standing Order that the clerk was using, it says no debate shall be allowed upon proposals for filling the office of presiding officer. Now, it can be suggested that Mr. Augustine attempted to debate by suggesting that you go to Standing Order 92. But apart from that, Standing Order 92 speaks to the fact that if the Tobago House of Assembly standing orders are silent on an issue, you can go to the standing orders of the National Parliament. And he referred to an order where it stated if the Speaker of the House could not be chosen by a series of the secret ballots, then you can go to almost like pulling at straws in order to determine what they call lots. Now, the reasons I will have as concerns to that is because there is always context to everything. And whereas in some situations you can refer to the standing orders of Parliament, in some situations, I think we must look at the context of this one. At the level of Parliament, when they go into the Parliament to choose the Speaker, you are already going in with the government of the day established. You go in with the Prime Minister, you go with the Leader of the Opposition, you go with the, your MPs, and at that point, your Speaker is elected in the House.
Okay.
In the Tobago House of Assembly scenario, we are not going in with the government deciding. You're going in to choose a presiding officer who in turn is expected to decide on the chief secretary and give rise to the government in control. And so that is why, you know, you have almost as if you're mixing apples and oranges in that situation in order to choose. And so I think that is where we will have a differing of views in terms of who feels that we should be able to choose 92 as the option and the exit of getting out of the THA standing orders and reverting to the Parliament standing orders. But I feel that it is not as straightforward as that, and that we cannot just revert to using that system in order to choose our governance model.
Now, with all of that being said, do you believe this now gives us an opportunity, or do you think that we should amend the THA Act?
Well, the THA Act has to be amended. In fact, that we call it the Greater Autonomy Bill that has been, for quite some time, we have been championing that cause back and forth. But I now see it as an opportunity to really push to have the bill done, and not just to amend the act to treat with this situation right now, but to push for the bill to be done.
Okay. Many persons are commenting that it was your splitting of the votes which would have landed us in the 6-6 tie. I'm curious now, had you won your seat and it was 6-5-1, would you have joined with anyone to alleviate the current crisis that we're in?
That's a tough question. However, you know, I have had the opportunity to think about it over and over. And I don't think I would have given it to anyone.
Stood by yourself.
I think in this situation, I think it is, yes, we are in a crisis of the 6-6 tie, but I see it as an opportunity. And I think handing over the one seat to the one who would be 6 to form the government would be an easy way out. And I don't think we should be taking the easy way out on this one. I think the good Lord has provided us with this tie for a reason. Because if he wanted one side to win outright over the other, it would have been completed already. However, I believe that it is a time for us to think about ourselves as Tobagonians first and foremost, and to think about Tobago's future and how can we contribute to Tobago's future together. And for me, that is the opportunity that what persons want to call a crisis, I feel that it is an opportunity to get us to a better place faster in terms of Tobago's future and our development, in terms of our governance and even our democracy.
All right. Well, now, with all of that being said, do you believe both parties will now put aside their political differences in order to facilitate the development of the island?
Well, I certainly hope that they will do that, because, you know, I heard the Prime Minister mention that Tobago should
fix our business.
Yes, Tobago should fix its business, and that he's not getting involved. And if they need Parliament, you know, in other words, they know where to find Parliament. And, you know, we cannot be championing a cause for greater autonomy for Tobago and not being able to sit down around the table and come up with a way forward by ourselves to go forward with this challenge. And I still remember when we were looking at getting greater autonomy, sending the bill to Trinidad. I know that Over London back then was able to cock his party hat to one side and, you know, invite other parties to the table to have meaningful conversations and to champion the Greater Autonomy Bill as Tobagonians and not just as individual parties. And I think that is what is needed right now, for both sides to see where at the end of the day, they both have to give and take. There has to be a give and take situation in going forward with this and being able to find a meaningful way out of it. And if they are focused on the bigger picture as to why we are in this position of 6 and 6, if they are focusing on the bigger picture that Tobago did not give a full mandate to any of them, they gave them a shared mandate. And if they take that further, then it means putting aside their differences and focusing on the bigger picture, which is Tobago. And I think if they're able to do that, they can come up with some a way forward that can work in the interim while we push as a group for the Greater Autonomy Bill to be completed and returned to us in Tobago.
Okay. There's a lot of conversations about heading back to the polls shortly. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that this is the better way forward, or give us your view on this?
I don't believe it's in the best interest of anyone to head back to the polls shortly. Yes. First of all, you have major voter apathy out there. I mean, when you listen and you read on Facebook, people said, "Oh my God, I am tired, another vote." And so you may not truly get persons coming out.
So there will be a decrease in that's your prediction?
Yes. You will have an even increased voter apathy of persons they wouldn't come out. And I think we would be defeating the purpose again of why are we here in this situation. So if we can be guaranteed that we can have a situation where our bill is delivered to us in a timely manner, yes, but I think it's also an opportunity to re-educate the people of Tobago as to what the bill is really about. And I am excited because young people are forced to get involved in the conversation because of this 6-6. And so whereas in the past, persons say, greater autonomy, whatever, and they're not listening, I think at this time we have the opportunity to really do the re-education of your Tobagonian, your average Tobagonian, as to really what the greater autonomy means, and to get them involved in the conversation even more as to what we expect to be delivered to us. And it's important because when the bill left Tobago to go to Trinidad, from what I understand, there have been a series of changes, but no one knows. When you ask anyone, what are those changes that they consider, that have been made at the level of the Joint Select Committee in Parliament. And no one seems to know what those changes are. So I think there's an opportunity, again, to re-educate, to advise persons what those changes are, and have them weigh in. And let us get it finally done once and for all.
All right. You seem to be, you are highly knowledgeable about the THA. If they were to call on you again to act as the presiding officer, would you accept this offer?
I think the position of presiding officer right now, you need somebody who can be there, who will be focused on just treating with the business of hand. I see my role now as really speaking out on some of the issues and having a wider platform to share and educate the persons. And I think if I take the role as presiding officer, that would limit my role in really being a champion to educate the people and to, to get them involved in a greater democratic process. And I think that has been my passion coming out of the presiding officer chair. From the many programs that I started there, it was always getting a greater participation in our democratic process. And I think at this point that I have gotten to that limit in terms of being in that chair, and therefore being on the ground with persons, advising them and helping them more to understand the process. I see that better as my role. I think there are a lot more persons who can be chosen. They need to choose a presiding officer who both sides can trust, who the people of Tobago feel that they can trust. And given the fact that you have so many young persons around the table, I think they need a presiding officer who perhaps is in a little bit of senior years, to give some balance to the house, and so a couple of names would come to mind. There's Dr. Eastland Mackenzie. She has been a senator and she knows about standing orders very quickly. And I think both sides should be able to trust her. And I think she may do well.
Okay.
Yes.
And what do you feel about having a younger one, though? Like, do you think that that would not also be beneficial, like giving the youth an opportunity to step forward and show themselves?
Yes, but like I said, I think we need to have some balance in the house. We have a number of young people on either side, and I think we need to have a senior face in that position, especially during this time where it's such a tenuous situation between the two parties. I think you need a senior position who everyone knows is a no-nonsense person and who will not split hairs to say what they have to say. And I really feel that that is perhaps what they need to consider.
I really like that response. We see a lot of persons on social media saying that Tobago is starting to pull away from quote-unquote party politics. Do you agree with this sentiment as it relates to the results?
Well, I would like to see that in a way, because it means that if you are pulling away from party politics, it means that you are getting involved in greater democracy, which is the right to choose. The right to choose whomsoever you feel that you should go with, and not just be pushed into a situation of, because my party is doing this, that it has to be this way or it's always right this way. And that is how you will have growth in our democracy and growth in our governance. And perhaps again, 6 is the opportunity to pursue that. I mean, even with me running as an independent and getting that many votes, it says something that people are willing to look at other options than just the party politics. So I think we are all part of that growth and development and the way forward for shared governance and a progressive democracy.
Okay, as you spoke about shared governance, how would you, or what would you recommend for us in terms of a situation like that? How would you establish a shared governance? Because I know you have spoken about a new hybrid model.
Yes.
Can you give us some insight on that?
Now, we come from years of a culture of winner takes all. Yes? And for once, we are in a position where we are in the 6-6 situation. Now, the Tobago House of Assembly Act, I believe it's Section 34 and Section 36, speaks to the fact that, when the House is dissolved, that you have the Chief Secretary and the Executive Council continues to function until a new House is constituted, until the Chief Secretary hands over to either himself as the new Chief Secretary or hands over to another Chief Secretary who is not himself. And so the situation right now, yes, it's governed by the Tobago House of Assembly Act. It is in there. But perhaps we need to look further at the court of public opinion. And if we have the new Tobago House of Assembly Act coming into being, there are suggestions as to whether we should have 2 houses, how to begin having better transparency and accountability, and how do we increase our capacity in the house to be able to achieve the level of oversight that we want. And I have been discussing in a few quarters, and the fact that perhaps it is a time for us to say, how can we, in the interest of Tobago and Tobago's future, during this period, determine that we could have the possibility of shared governance. And what do I mean by shared governance? Shared governance in accepting that the mandate given is that equally 6 on each side. And therefore no one wins except the fight over the popular vote.
Okay.
So let's assume we say the popular vote goes to the PNM. And we said, okay, we agree, and this is where both sides will have to come together, sit at a table, and make these agreements. Again, cocking their hats off to the side, right? Letting their Tobago side show and come to an agreement. So we say, okay, well, the Chief Secretary we give to the incumbent who is there now. But the Deputy Chief Secretary, you could appoint as the, I guess your deputy political leader is supposed to be the Chief Secretary, Farley Augustine.
Okay.
So you have Chief Secretary, I assume it would be Ansel Dennis. Farley Augustine will be your Deputy Chief Secretary. And as Deputy Chief Secretary, I would suggest that he takes on finance. So you have some checks and balances between them. And then each of them will choose 2 assemblymen on their sides to join them as part of that executive council. So you have 2 from PNM, 2 from PDP. And then you also have 1 councillor each from each of them. A councillor who has some specializes in some areas so that they can have adequate support in running the assembly. But we also want to get your civil society involved. And, perhaps it is a time where you then have the 2 additional councillors can be recommended by civil society groups. And of those 2 councillors, you add 1 into the executive and 1 to stay in opposition. And so what you have is a shared governance model that includes equal sides and also bringing in Tobago civil, from any of the groups out there, coming together, choosing somebody who they feel would be able to make a contribution within that time. Because the executive is supposed to be the Chief Secretary plus, I think, 7. And so that will make up the ratios. So let's go, after you've done that, the rest of the 6 persons are now part of what we will normally call the minority bench or the opposition. And so you also have a mixed view there of persons who are prepared to oversight those who are sitting in administration. And so once they can sit down and discuss something like that and perhaps agree on it, then they can agree on the presiding officer. And you're not going to have the 6-6 because you've had some arrangements made. They go into the House and they vote on the agreements made. And then we go to work to ensure that we can at least manage and show Tobagonians and even the rest of the world that we are able to come together and manage our own business. Because we can't be asking for greater autonomy, and when a crisis occurs, we can't deal with it with ourselves. And so that way, that is something, a hybrid that we can look at. I hope that they're willing to consider something like that in terms of bringing an end to the deadlock and seeing, Tobago's business go forward in a particular way. And in addition to that, having the oversight at the level of the opposition is something that can happen. Now, once they're able to do that and form the House, then they can easily utilize the standing orders at any time to facilitate their needs, whether they want to suspend them, whether they want to go into, the committee and amend it initially to deal with, some of the challenges that may occur as they come up with that. Like take, for instance, they could decide that instead of waiting so long to have motions by your private member, which is your opposition, that they want to now bring forward and give more motions just during this period to the opposition in terms of facilitating that oversight. It's something that I certainly feel can work. It's something I think that they must consider, and I feel that doing something like this, both sides will be able to show Tobago and show the rest of the national community and even the Caribbean that we are mature enough
to put politics aside.
To put politics aside and put the future of Tobago on the front burner. And that way, I think we would be developing a model such that when and given that you're doing it that way, you now have a stronger voice to champion the cause of the bill in Trinidad, because you're going forward and trying to unite Tobago around this issue. Now, the opportunity also is that once you do that, the representatives can be talking to their people in the communities about what this means and how do we go forward. Now, after we have received you could do this for 9 months, yes. I would say, the life cycle of baby to birth is 9 months, right? So I like that 9 months. But you can try it. And you give enough time for the bill to be completed, for you to be sure that the bill has taken into consideration everything that you need. You have begun to formulate in your head a new assembly and a new way of doing business. Because we have to have a new way of doing business. We cannot be asking for greater autonomy without involving greater participation from the people, greater accountability and transparency. And the current makeup of the legislature does not allow for that. Remember, we are also having lawmaking powers to come with the bill, and therefore, it would give us a perspective on how do we expand the House to be able to achieve that. And not just looking at something that is textbook, but coming up with our own hybrid on the way forward that satisfies the needs of Tobagonians.
Okay. Do you think that's something you'll put in pen to paper and issue towards the new assemblymen and them?
Of course, I wouldn't mind doing it, as long as they're willing to seriously consider taking off their hats to do this. Definitely, I am willing to do that.
No, that hybrid model sounds like it's something that can actually work. However, a lot of persons were saying, why don't we just simply add another seat? Instead of having 12, we'll have 13. What's your take on this?
That has to come as part of the changes coming from the bill. Yes? The bill would include, in fact, I think the bill suggested 15.
Okay.
So whatever has to come with the bill. So you would have to get that amendment. But just doing that amendment and going back out to to the elections, I don't know if that will achieve the objective. And I think also looking at the whole thing in terms of using this as an opportunity to get the bill done, because, you know, this is a window that is closing on us. And if we don't push hard during this window, and this window closes on us, I don't know when next we may have the opportunity to have the Greater Autonomy Bill delivered to us.
Okay. Now, we're starting to be pressed for time, but this has been a great interview. However, we'll just ask probably a couple more questions, and anything you'd like to add on top of that. Going forward, what do you expect to see from the THA?
In terms of?
In terms of what's occurring right now. Now, we know that we haven't decided on a presiding officer, and we have to go back to the polls.
Yes.
What do you expect to see throughout this time now?
Okay. So I understand tomorrow they're going into the House.
I think it's at 10 a.m. if I'm not mistaken.
And if a conversation is not had amongst them, then what you will see is a whole day of secret ballots, deadlock, secret ballots, deadlock, maybe break for tea, secret ballots, deadlock, until the House is suspended in the afternoon. And if we don't do something, that could go on for weeks.
Okay.
I am hopeful that persons there will grow some maturity overnight and be able to sit down around a table like adults and come to some level of agreement on the way forward. Like I said, when Over London was there, he was able to collaborate with Ho Choi. I think even Ashworth was invited to some of those sessions to participate. And at the end of the day, that group championed the cause for even getting the bill to Trinidad. So it's not to say that precedent has not been set. And I think it's an opportunity and certainly a must that they have to sit down together around the table and come up with something that shows to Begonians that they have the future of Tobago at heart.
Okay. And as we're on that topic, if we do have to go back to the polls now, how important do you think are the votes of the younger persons?
Critical. And that is why I am very heartened by this interview, and I certainly hope that there are a number of young people out there watching, because you will have to be the voice of reason in all of this. Your weighing in on this situation is important, and it's not just weighing in from a party perspective, but from an information perspective. An information perspective on where you want to see your future go. And who do you think is capable of taking it forward? And I, again, to me, sitting down around a table and demonstrating that you can take off your hat and work together is saying to the young people, listen, I'm of the quality that you can trust, that it is not always about party politics with me. I am prepared to sacrifice and do whatever it takes to put Tobago on the front burner.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Doctor. We know that you will have a panel discussion tomorrow. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. And I must applaud, again, another platform for young people, the Tobago Civil Net platform. They're carrying us this evening, on this afternoon, on their platform, but tomorrow afternoon they will also be continuing a similar conversation with a larger panel. I believe we have Clyde Weatherhead. He is a lawyer. We have Deborah Moore Miggins, another lawyer, Dr. Vaness James, and myself, and it will be moderated by Martin George.
Can you just give us the time and where we can see this from?
Tobago Civil Net, Facebook Live, and at 8 p.m. Tune in sharp.
All right. Thank
Yes.
you very much for your time, Dr.
Yes.
Angus. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you.
And we really hope to see you all tomorrow. Check it out tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Tobago Civil Net and
Yes.
Facebook Live. Thank you very much.
Okay.